Some people take exception to me saying that Al Haymon is smarter than Eddie Hearn. Now, for those people who want to play semantics with the word smarter, let me offer you an alternate statement and instead say that Al Haymon is a more shrewd and crafty businessman than Eddie Hearn. That's not to say that Al Haymon is a better human being or a worse human being. That's not to say that Al Haymon treats his fighters any better. That's not to say that Al Haymon gives the fans any better value for money. I'm not saying any of that. Because ultimately, as businessmen, Hearn and Haymon are out for themselves. Different businessmen have different philosophies in terms of how to go about benefiting themselves. Some businessmen are more penny pinching, they're more tight, and they try and cut corners and they see that as the best way to achieve success for themselves. Other promoters are more frivolous, and they think that that is a better philosophy in terms of bringing more success back for yourself. But ultimately, as I say, they're all out for themselves. You know, some businessmen are going to treat their clients or treat their employees better and be more generous with them. Some are going to be more stingy with them. You know, and both methods can be successful. You know, it's just different philosophies. So understand what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Haymon necessarily treats his fighters better or necessarily treats the fans better. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I think he's a more crafty and shrewd businessman than Eddie Hearn is. Now, on screen right now, this is Al Haymon's little bio on BoxRec, which I'm going to read for you, just to give you some background on the man, because even though he's been around a very long time in boxing, because of the fact that he doesn't do interviews and he doesn't appear on camera and stuff like that, there's a lot of boxing fans who still don't know much about him. He's an enigma. So let me give you his background here by reading his bio and adding a little bit to it because there's some details that they haven't put on here. It says here, Al Haymon is an advisor, manager and or promoter to many top boxers in the United States. His brother Bobby Haymon fought professionally from 1969 to 1978 and had a record of 21-8. In his last fight, he was stopped in 3 rounds by Sugar Ray Leonard, who was 9-0 at the time. Haymon grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and studied economics at Harvard University, where he earned a master's degree in business administration. He began promoting musicians while in school and worked with such notables as the OJs, the Levert family, MC Hammer, New Edition, Whitney Houston, and Mary J. Blige. And let me just interject there before I carry on reading this bio. He also worked with Beyonce Knowles, Al Haymon. Okay, that's something they didn't put in here. Anyway, let me continue. He eventually created 14 businesses, mostly to deal with myriad aspects of live concert promotion. Haymon and his partner Phil Casey were among the first urban concert promoters to package several acts into a single tour, some of which ran for 300 days. They created the Budweiser Superfest, a concert series that ran from 1979 to 1999 and was revived in 2010. In 1992, Haymon, in a rare interview, told USA Today that they put on some 500 shows and grossed $60 million the year before. So let me interject again here, people. In 1991, Al Haymon grossed $60 million. Now understand that when you adjust that for inflation, that is an enormous amount of money that he made in 1991. Okay, when he was promoting music shows and stuff like that. So anyway, let me continue. Haymon also co-promoted the Eddie Murphy Raw comedy tour, which at the time was the highest grossing comedy tour and comedy film ever. Again, I have to interject here. He promoted Eddie Murphy Raw. I mean, for anyone of my kind of generation, you will know how massive Eddie Murphy Raw was. I mean, that was a huge deal. Still to this day, that's one of the greatest comedy stand-up, shows ever was Eddie Murphy Raw. Al Haymon promoted that or co-promoted that. So he's been making big moves for many, many years in business, mainly in music prior to being involved in boxing. Let me continue. It says here, Haymon came into boxing in 2000 and worked initially with Vernon Forrest. He is licensed in Nevada as a manager, yet he also performs many of the same functions as a promoter. He received the Al Buck Award as Manager of the Year from the Boxing Writers Association of America in 2005. 2012 and 2013. Heyman's biggest client is Floyd Mayweather Jr., who he manages and helped maneuver out of his contract with Top Rank Boxing for $750,000. If I would have had Al Haymon from the beginning, I probably would be a millionaire right now, Mayweather said. Heyman's actual dealings and methods are in large part a mystery, as he works by design, solely behind the scenes, declines media interview requests, and refuses to hold face-to-face meetings. He has repeatedly, however, secured big matches for his clientele on major US television networks, including HBO and Showtime. He has also been criticized for creating easy paydays for his fighters. Heyman's influence at the premium cable networks is unparalleled, said ESPN's Dan Rayfield. And here below his BoxRec bio, he got a list of many, if not most, of the fighters that Al Haymon has worked with. And it is an incredibly long list and a very impressive list. And of course, the person at the top of the list, Floyd Mayweather Jr. You know, Floyd gets a lot of credit for being this smart businessman, when really the person who deserves the credit is Al Haymon. I mean, Floyd himself has pretty much insinuated that Al Haymon is the brains of the operation. Without Al Haymon, Floyd would not be, not only, wouldn't it be as rich as he is, he might not even be undefeated if it wasn't for Al Haymon. So Al Haymon was the brains behind Floyd's operation, having those fights on Cinco de Mayo against Latino fighters all the time. That's Al Haymon. Turning Floyd into this massive heel who would antagonize people, retire from the sport, not care that much about the belts. Al Haymon. Al Haymon was the mastermind behind all that. So a very, very, very smart businessman. Very shrewd, very crafty. Now, he came onto the radar of most boxing fans when he was working with Golden Boy, specifically when he actually split with Golden Boy and took most of their stable with him. He essentially stole the vast majority of fighters from Golden Boy. And at the time I was thinking, how on earth didn't Golden Boy see this coming? Here's this advisor / manager who's got all these deals with Golden Boy fighters. How didn't Golden Boy know that he was going to take all their stable? Well, as I say, he's clearly very shrewd. He's clearly very maybe manipulative in a business situation. And he was able to rock them to sleep and then take all their fighters literally overnight. Because I remember when it happened virtually overnight that he went off with all Golden Boy's fighters. And Golden Boy's never been the same since. Ever since then, Golden Boy has become pretty much Canelo Promotions. That's all it is now. Golden Boy really don't have anything else other than promoting Canelo. But previously they had so many top fighters at Golden Boy, So Haymon, very shrewd and smart, managed to take the majority of Golden Boy's fighters and set up his own brand, which is PBC, Premier Boxing Champions. Now, originally Al Haymon tried to introduce a very radical business model, which involved buying airtime from multiple different networks right the way across the spectrum and, putting his shows on and recouping the money from advertising revenue. And for those who don't know, that is pretty much the opposite of the standard business model with boxing. See, the standard model is a network pays you as the promoter to put your show on their network, and they keep all the money from the advertising revenue. And then, of course, they've got the pay-per-view model where, the pay-per-view revenue is split between the promoter, the fighter, and the network. But those are the traditional ways of doing it. Haymon flipped the script and he said, no, he said to the networks, you don't pay me a penny. I'll buy the airtime off you and I'll keep all the advertising revenue. Now, his strategy was not only to do that, but also to flood the market in the United States with his brand, PBC, because he looked at what Dana White did with the UFC and he thought, I want to do something similar with boxing. I want to make the belts obsolete and have my own PBC belt. I basically want to monopolize big time boxing in the United States and just make PBC front and center. So if you remember, the early PBC shows were very UFC-esque, where the fighter would come to the ring on their own. They wouldn't allow them to have belts in the ring and stuff like that. Very, very PBC-esque. And ultimately, they wanted to have this PBC championship, which would become like the UFC championship. So yeah, that's what he tried to introduce, the radical model. And he was hoping to kind of bring back the 70s or bring back the 80s by flooding the market with boxing, giving the public access to free boxing in the United States, even high-level championship boxing. This was to try and bring back the 80s, not because he cares that much about the fans, because he ultimately thinks it would benefit himself. Yeah, that's how all these businessmen are thinking about what's going to benefit themselves and their business. They're not just doing it out of the good of their hearts, right? But as a byproduct of him trying to benefit himself, because of the strategy he was using, it did benefit fans for a long time, getting all this free boxing across multiple different networks. But ultimately, that business model didn't work. It was unsustainable. And some people are going to say, well, see, this proves that Heymon isn't that smart after all. Look, I don't care how smart you are. You could be the most genius businessman in the world. You're still going to make mistakes. You're still going to embark in ventures which fail. And since then, Al Heyman's, PBC business model has reverted back to the traditional model. He's streamlined his business. And, he's showing his smarts and his intelligence in different ways now. Now, as I say, that particular model didn't work. This whole boxing version of UFC hasn't manifested yet. But he's still trying that. Even though flooding the market hasn't worked, he's still trying to have this in-house situation, like a boxing version of UFC. That you can still see that that's what he's trying to work towards. All right. Now, given how radical Al Heymon has been, and given the bold moves and the power moves he's made, very predictably, he's made a hell of a lot of enemies in working the way that he's been working. And if you remember, Golden Boy and Top Rank tried to sue him, took him to court, and even Kathy Duva with Main Events wasn't exactly Al Heyman's biggest friend. So all these people who ordinarily would be rivals ganged up to try and get at Al Heymon, because what he was doing was threatening their livelihoods, it was threatening their businesses. But yeah, Al Heymon now works primarily with Showtime and Fox. And he's already frozen out one of the sanctioning bodies, the WBO. Okay, apparently no longer recognizes them as a legitimate sanctioning body. And the way that he's matching his fighters now, he's trying to be more in-house than anybody else. Okay, it's not to say that Eddie Hearn doesn't like in-house fights. It's not to say that Top Rank don't like them, etc. They do. But certainly with Eddie Hearn, he's far more willing to put his top guys in with, top guys who are fighting with rival networks or rival promoters. Al Heymon is less willing to do that. He hasn't, other than Floyd Mayweather, he hasn't created a superstar. And some people will see that and say, well, he's not that smart, is he? Look at the list of fighters that Al Heyman's got or he's worked with. He's smart. His model is different. Al Heyman's business model isn't based around one fighter as much as, let's say, Matchroom. Eddie Hearn's business model has been with Anthony Joshua. Now, Eddie Hearn is now trying to sign a whole heap of heavyweights and whatnot to try and bolster his situation and not make it so much about Joshua, particularly in the wake of Joshua losing to Ruiz. He's like, I better sign a whole heap of heavyweights now, because Joshua's days may be numbered. But for the longest time, it really was the Anthony Joshua show with Matchroom, similar to Canelo with Golden Boy. But Al Heymon is a lot more diversified than that, The way that he's moved Deontay Wilder's career, he hasn't turned Wilder into a superstar, but he's been pretty shrewd, okay? And again, when I say that Al Heymon is smart, I'm not saying that he's doing what's best for the fighter. A lot of the time he's not, in my opinion. He's doing what's best for himself. But the genius in Al Heymon is doing what's best for himself, but convincing the fighter that he's doing what's best for them. That's the genius in it. And I'm not saying, this is morally the right thing to do at all. I'm just telling you how crafty and smart this man is, how good he is at manipulating the fighters psychologically, convincing them that moves which look obviously bad for the fighter are somehow good for them. I mean, for Deontay Wilder to turn down multiple offers to face AJ is terrible for Deontay Wilder's bank balance. It's terrible. Obviously, Wilder is not the sharpest tool in the box. Most of his fans are not very bright. So even now they're saying, oh, well, look at the Andy Ruiz situation. Joshua is worth 100 million or something. I mean, they're all kind of crazy figures. We don't know the real figures of what the Saudis are paying for AJ Ruiz too. We don't know. But they're saying this shows that Wilder was right to turn down the AJ fight. I mean, these people are so short-sighted and intellectually challenged. It's incredible. You know, they're the kind of people who would have a job working in McDonald's. They'd get approached by somebody who offers them $1 million a year job working in a giant company. And they'd turn down the $1 million a year job. They'd say, oh, well, I've looked at that company and I've seen that there are loads of people in there earning a lot more than $1 million and they only want to pay me $1 million. That's crazy. I'm going to stick here at McDonald's. Now, you would have to be insane to turn down the big $1 million a year job and stay at McDonald's, unless you had a viable alternative, unless you had a different company offering you 1.5 million, or maybe matching the $1 million and giving you better perks with the job. So it's only smart to turn it down if there's a viable alternative. Deontay Wilder turned down, the $1 million job. This is a metaphor. Okay, don't take it literally. It's a metaphor. He turned down the big money to stay on the McDonald's money when he doesn't have a viable alternative. That's not smart. That's not the best thing for Deontay Wilder. Right? Because that $1 million job in this metaphor may never be there again. It may be gone for good. So when it's there, you take it. And when you take it, if a better job comes up for 5, 10, 20 million a year, you take that. That's how you elevate yourself. But Deontay Wilder, not being the sharpest tool in the box, he turns it down. And his fans applaud him for turning it down multiple times. Madness. Absolute madness. But he's not the only one that Al Haymon is convinced to turn down career high paydays. I mean, Luis Ortiz, probably even a better example, because Luis Ortiz, man, he's scratching around when it comes to earning money in the heavyweight division. He ain't making no money. He turned down $7 million to face Anthony Joshua. Must be kicking himself now, but somehow Al Haymon got in his head and got in his ear and told him that was the best thing for him to do. Madness. Adam Kownacki came out, a couple weeks ago, and he admitted, you know what? I should have been in shape because I would have loved to have taken that AJ fight when it was offered to me. He's kicking himself that he missed out on that opportunity. That's what a smart person would do, because that opportunity might never come around again. That payday may never present itself again, so you got to take it when it's there. But Haymon, he's one of the few people that Haymon wasn't able to convince that it was a bad idea to fight AJ. but Haymon successfully has done that with Deontay Wilder, with Luis Ortiz, with, fighters in the middleweight division and the welterweight division. Now, in some instances, it is going to be best for a particular fighter not to take certain fights which don't benefit Haymon. It's going to be the best thing for the fighter too. In other instances, it's not going to be best for the fighter. I mean, in the middleweight division, what is Jamal Charlo doing? You got these golden boy fighters, Golovkin, with his own promotional company, Matchroom Fighters, etc., over on DAZN, making crazy money. What's Jamal Charlo making? Who the hell's he fighting? But somehow Al Haymon has convinced him that this is the best way to go about things. That this is what's best for his career. No, what's best for Jamal Charlo's career would be to get in there and be fighting the Golovkins, the Canelos, the Andrades. That's what's best for his career in terms of the paydays and whatnot. But Al Haymon ain't concerned about what's best for Jamal Charlo. He's concerned about what's best for himself. And he's making decisions for the benefit of himself far more than the benefit of his fighter. And again, Eddie Hearn is not making all these decisions solely for the benefit of the fighter. Of course not. He's in it for himself too, but they have different philosophies and strategies in terms of how to go about it. Eddie Hearn is more willing to put his top fighters in against other top fighters who are with rival promoters, rival networks, etc. You don't see Al Haymon putting his top heavyweights in against Anthony Joshua anymore. The game has changed for Haymon. He now sees Eddie Hearn as a threat because he's in the US market. Before, he was putting, Charles Martin when he had a belt, Brazil when he was a top contender in against Anthony Joshua. They were some of his best heavyweights at the time. Now he put Ruiz in with AJ. Yeah, Ruiz, a new signing to PBC, not really making any money, not really doing much. All right, I'll throw him in with AJ. But he ain't trying to put Wilder in against any matchroom fighters in a voluntary in their country. See, this is where Al Haymon is more shrewd than Eddie Hearn. Hearn went to the United States, Al Haymon's country. And in a voluntary defense, he put his fighter in with one of Heyman's guys. Haymon don't do that anymore. No way. Not in the current situation in the heavyweight division and in boxing in America. You're not going to see Haymon send Wilder over to the UK to have a voluntary defense against one of Eddie Hearn's heavyweights. Never going to happen. Wilder probably would do it if he was with a promoter who convinced him it was the best thing. Wilder would probably do it. But it's not Wilder calling the shots. It's not Wilder's strategy. This is Al Haymon's strategy. And it's all about what Haymon is doing. Wilder's just not smart enough to figure out that these moves are not what's best for him in his career. It's what's best for Haymon, or what Haymon thinks is best for him, but it's not what's best for Wilder. Wilder's just not bright enough to figure it out. And many fighters that Haymon has, the Charlos, not bright enough to figure it out. Certainly Jamal, who's at middleweight. Jamel, junior middleweight, Haymon's got most of that division, a good proportion of that division. But at middleweight, there's nobody out there for Jamal Charlo. But somehow he's loyal to Haymon. Haymon has created a cult, virtually. It's like a cult there in PBC now. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it in boxing. A guy who's managed to create this virtual cult with his fighters who believe in him to this extent that they're willing to freeze, other fighters out who are with rival promoters to this degree. Errol Spence, who is a tremendous fighter, is happy to freeze out Terence Crawford. What on earth is that all about? That's Al Haymon's doing. We're not talking about some regular run-of-the-mill garden variety world champion in Terence Crawford. We're talking about one of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the sport. Undefeated. Multi-weight world champion. And Errol Spence is running around acting like it's a good thing to be freezing Terence Crawford out. And that's the brains of Al Haymon, man. That's how smart this guy is. He's just trying to have an in-house situation in the welterweight division, freeze everybody out, protect his own assets and minimize the risks that he's taking. He'll risk a guy like Ruiz who ain't really got nothing to lose for him or for PBC. He's got everything to gain from that situation, putting him in there against AJ. But as I've already mentioned, he ain't gonna do what Hearn did and send Wilder over to the UK to fight some dangerous guy in a voluntary. So anyway, let me end this right here. That's why I say that Al Haymon is a more crafty and shrewd businessman than Eddie Hearn. It doesn't mean he's a better human being. It doesn't mean that he treats his fighters better. It doesn't mean that he delivers better value for money for the fans. In fact, what he's doing right now with the whole in-house business is doing the fans a disservice. But yeah, he's just a much more crafty guy as far as I can tell. And I think Eddie Hearn is finding that out at the moment with this Andy Ruiz rematch situation, trying to get this rematch on. What on earth is Al Haymon up to with Andy Ruiz? You know, you can see that Ruiz is being manipulated. Ruiz wasn't like this when he was with Top Rank, you know, but Haymon has got in his ear. He's got the Al Haymon mind control on him, and he's got Ruiz acting like a diva, which most PBC fighters behave like. They're like divas, you know? An example of how Al Haymon does things which are not always in the best interest of his fighter would be the way that he strung Amir Khan along for years, promising him the Mayweather fight, telling Khan, you'll get the fight. Just be patient. You'll get the fight. Just be patient. That's what he's telling him for years. Khan never got the fight. You know, Khan was being told by Haymon for a very, very long time that he was going to get it, which is one of the reasons that Khan waited for so long. Not the only reason. You know, Khan is a little off mentally himself. But Heyman's promises certainly assisted that situation, you know, in terms of Khan waiting and waiting and waiting and wishing on a start. And with this Andy Ruiz situation right now, I don't know what Heyman's up to. This is the thing with Haymon. It's more difficult to know what he's doing and to read his moves. Eddie Hearn is a guy who you can see coming from a mile away, whereas Haymon is a lot more crafty and difficult to understand in terms of what he's doing. And part of that is obviously the fact that he doesn't appear on camera. So if you're not doing interviews, you're not going to be giving away your motivations and or what have you. People don't have anything to read into. They just see the end result. But with Andy Ruiz, we'll find out in due course exactly what he's up to. Is he hoping to me, it just seems as though these are stalling tactics. That Haymon is hoping for what? AJ and Hearn to get frustrated and maybe forget about the rematch? Or is he hoping for one of the belts to get stripped away from the situation and have Wilder fight for one of the vacant? I mean, what is he hoping to happen from this? It's fascinating. It's frustrating as a fan of boxing, but it's fascinating from a business perspective to see what Al Haymon is actually up to in this Andy Ruiz situation, because there's a lot of shenanigans going on here. And I cannot imagine it's Ruiz. I have to imagine it's Al, because it has all the hallmarks of Al Haymon all over it. I mean, it's a very straight, again, with Eddie Hearn, it's a very straightforward situation. Andy Ruiz signed a contract, which included a rematch clause. And he just wants Andy Ruiz to honor the contract. Simple. There's nothing shady. There's nothing untoward. There's nothing manipulative about what Eddie Hearn's doing in this situation. It's very straightforward. You sign this contract, honor the contract, end of story. Whereas Andy Ruiz is like, well, actually, it's not that simple. And that's Al Haymon talking. You know? How is it not that simple? Well, clearly they've found loopholes or something in a contract, or they've got some kind of strategy of dragging it out for whatever reason to, you know, do whatever they're going to do. So we'll see what happens with it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about everything I've said in this video. It's happening. I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.